Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with MysticGenMara.com, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho. And tonight is the series, my light feels weird, that I have titled Occult and Crochet. And I don't have any new projects at my day job this last 10 days, 2 weeks or so. It has been a little rough and busy, which is why I am not doing another occultist that definitely deserves more of my attention with the research. So I'm taking one out of my previously written files and bringing him forward instead. And for this gentleman that I am going to speak of tonight is well known in the New Thought community, and thanks to one particular movie that came out in, I believe, 2006, his name was relaunched back into the Law of Attraction community as well. And that gentleman's name is Wallace Wattles. So if you've watched the movie or read the book The Secret by Rhonda Byrne, this is one of the men mentioned in that media. He's basically one of the primary reasons she decided to make the movie and write the book was this book that he had written, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But so who was this gentleman in the first place? When did he live? How was he raised? Did he actually practice what he preached? So let's dive in and see what pops up. Wallace Wattles was born in 1860, and the surprising thing is there's a little bit of question that as I was going through this, because there are places that say he was born in New York, but then there's other places that say his parents were from New York but he was born in Illinois. Others say, including himself, that he was born and raised in Illinois. Either way, he did grow up in Illinois. That's been proven. There was a census from 1880 where he was with his family in Nunda Township in Illinois. So there's proof he was there. His father was a gardener by trade, and his mother was a homemaker and full-time mom. From everything that I was digging through, I could not find any reference to a sibling for him, so it sounds like he was an only child, which, considering the time frame, 1860s through 1890s, only having one kid was a bit of an oddity. There's no reference to medical conditions of either parent or anything else that would explain it. So that is a little strange that he was the only kid in a time frame where having 5 to 15 kids was pretty common. For example, my grandfather, who was born in the early 1900s, was one of 13 children. So having big families, especially in the Midwest, was extremely common for work, if nothing else. And it looks like he was an only sibling, which, like I said, is a little strange. Also, as I was digging through this, and I didn't know this until I started really digging through his history, his last name was originally Walters, which was his parents' last name, but he changed it as he grew up to Wattles. Some theorize that it was for a... I just completely lost the word I was looking for. Pseudonym so that he could write under another name, but he actually started going by the last name of Wattles. So I'll bounce back and forth calling him Wallace or Wattles, depending. So, but we're talking about the same person. It was said that Wattles was raised with little classroom education. Again, pretty common for the time, especially for those who were exceptionally poor, and it sounds like that's where he started out, was like Little House on the Prairie poor. He felt excluded from the business world and wealth from a very young age, and this comes into big play later on in his life. Wattles did eventually marry, though, as he grew up, and I have this kind of scattered around a little bit, but there's kind of a point to my madness with this. So Wattles was married to a lady named Abby Bryant, and of course her last name became Wattles or Walters, depending on the source. Again, there was multiple back and forth on this. And they had 3 children. Florence, the oldest, Russell, and Agnes. So they still didn't have a big family, but they at least, there was more in the family than what Wallace had come from. Wattles had some interesting ideas, though. In 1896, he attended a convention and met a minister of a congregational church and a professor of applied Christianity. I'm not really fully understanding the applied Christianity in a professorship, but who knows. This minister's name was George Davis Heron, and he was gaining notoriety, not good popularity, notoriety, for preaching what he termed Christian socialism. Yeah, that's where we're headed here for a few minutes. This meeting led to Wattles beginning to write. He was wanting to spread the message of a socialized Jesus. My question is, did you actually read any of the Bible and any of the references therein? Because that doesn't quite work. Anyway, his daughter Florence said that her father was kicked out of the Methodist Church for heresy for his support of this socialized or socialism-based Jesus. Well, at the time, the Methodists were very literal in their work with the Bible, so for those guys to say you're out because, obviously you're not following what the Bible actually was teaching at the time, so that was kind of a shocker to me when I was going through this. It was also during this time that he wrote 2 books about socialism and Christianity and how he perceived them as working together and being very compatible. I linked them if you're interested in it. From my understanding, he's fairly off base with this concept, and it's interesting to note that he kind of held on to his socialism-based ideas throughout his life, but what happens later on in his life defeats and denies the entire policy that he was espousing. It gets interesting. We'll just go there. Anyway, Wattles did dip his toes into the political world. In 1908, he ran as a candidate in the Socialist Party of America for a House of Representatives seat, failed to secure the seat. Again, not that surprising considering the time period we're talking about. We had Russia, the Tsars were out, the communists were coming in, you had a whole bunch of chaos going on in Northern Europe, all during this time period, so socialism and communism were like, ex-nay, stay away. And so it doesn't really surprise me that he didn't win that seat at the first round. He tried to run again in 1910, though, but he was running for the prosecuting attorney in Madison County, Indiana, as a Socialist Party member. Again, no go. People were pretty much watching what was going on in Europe and Russia and were not okay with it. Even though there wasn't a lot of news, there was enough getting out that people were not interested in anything to do with that. He did influence his daughter Florence, the oldest, to become a socialist as well, and I have to say, just from a personal perspective, probably not the best decision he could have made. He had so many other talents that he could have encouraged her with, and that was the one that stuck with her specifically. And all of the research that I did, it really focused on Florence being the primary one that took that political stance. The other 2 didn't hold that line as strong, and they tended to not associate as much as what it looks like. They weren't hateful to each other, but it was kind of that family grew apart thing is what I was finding. Again, if you have other documentation, I would love to see it, honestly, because it was interesting to research this. Over the years, Wattles attended several of what was called the New Thought meetings, and he began to teach Sunday night lectures in Indiana during this time period between 1906 to 1920-ish. there was this period of time where he was really involved with it and really wanting to understand it more. The New Thought concepts were originally basically what we would call today the self-help community, the law of attraction community, the concept of the mind can literally overpower various other authors that were very I just lost the word again. I have notes, but that's what we work off of. That were very foundational to the concept of New Thought. And he also wanted people to learn about the I'm going to screw this word up. Monistic theory of the cosmos. I had no idea what that was. I had to look it up. And that's surprising because I like weird theories. But this basically means that we are all connected in one form or another. It's the theory that we all are connected through the divine heart to each other, and we're all emanations of the divine heart. If you've ever watched the original Final Fantasy movie, the CGI animated one, the first one, not the, 14 or 12 or however many there have come out since, but they talk about the concept of Gaia, that we're all emanations of Gaia. We come here to experience, and then when we pass over, we return, bringing our enriching lives back to the heart of the universe to basically help it grow. It's a very, very Eastern concept as well. It's peppered throughout Confucianism, Hinduism. I think, and I have to double check this, but I believe it's also tied into Taoism. So you've got this belief that we're all connected and we all radiate out from the heart of the Creator, which is not untrue, but that's how he viewed the entire universe, and he really encouraged people to research and understand this, because it does change how you view and interact with other people when you start to bury yourself into that knowledge, which it is fascinating, don't get me wrong. But Wattles tried to sum up his research in his various books, such as Health Through New Thought and Fasting, and The Science of Being Great. Also linked those in the description as well. It is said that he lived his life from the philosophy that he wrote about and taught. He encouraged people to try out his techniques. Basically, test them in your own life. Don't take his word, try it for yourself. Which is a big thing for me as well. If someone comes to me for advice, for counsel, for what do I do in this situation, I don't tell somebody something that I have not personally practiced, done myself, or tried when we're talking metaphysics. And that's kind of how I ended up with my weird views, because that's how I have lived. Sorry, I want to double check. Okay, there we are. So he had these really fascinating ideas, and they were amazing in the fact that he's like, I'm going to lay this out. This is what I've done. This is how I've got to where I am. By this point, he's making good money. He's written some books. He's on a teaching circuit. There's money coming into him, and from his extreme poverty level or origins, he's doing pretty good by this point. And it's because of these thought techniques that he was using. Wattles did what I tell people to do. Use your life as your laboratory. Try things out. I've done videos on stuff. There are healing techniques and some meditations that I've done. Those are things that I use personally. And when I work with people, those are things that I use because I've used them, I've been taught them, I've developed some on my own. Try it. That is the big thing. It doesn't mean you're going to, have to be buried as much as some of us have taken our lives to that extent. But it's always something that you want to experiment with. If you want to understand if the concepts in the movie The Secret are true, try them. I have. One of my friends and I did this. Total off topic right here, but this is a funny story. We've really buried ourselves. We watched the movie like once a week. We practiced the exercises that she talks about in the movie. We got her book, The Secret, going along with the movie. We read that, we practiced the exercises in there. That's how I found Wallace Wattles in the first place. And we did it with little, just really random things, like manifesting, it doesn't matter where we went, free coffee for refills. Most places it's 50 cents to $1 at the time, it's way more now. And for whatever reason, we didn't even put any reference to it, we would always get a free refill of coffee if we brought our own mug. That's just what we focused on. And we did that for like 3 weeks. Didn't really see anything change. Week 4, it didn't matter where we went. We were road tripping. We were working, road tripping due to our job. And it didn't matter where we were in the state. If we brought our own cups in, we never had to pay for coffee. There was something they would just, oh no, it's on the house, or someone else paid for it, or whatever. But it got to the point that it was such a commonplace thing. So then we tried it on other things, and you'd be surprised when you start building that confidence with little stuff. It's just a cup of coffee, really. How powerful some of those exercises are, because you are literally changing how your brain works. We've been kind of conditioned not in the healthiest way, and the new thought groups and the law of attraction groups realize that we are on a different wavelength than what we are consciously aware of, and when we rewire our brain to tap into that higher frequency, things change, and they change rapidly. But it takes the time to basically convince your subconscious mind that that's what we're doing and that's how we're working. So back on topic here, it's stuff like that was kind of fun. And one of the practices that's discussed in the movie, in her book, as well as the primary focus of Wallace Wattles' work, was creative visualization. That has become such a catchphrase in the modern world, but he was one of the first ones to really bring it forward. Again, this was turn of the century, 1900s. In the exercise, you take your next step. You look at the final goal, and you put as much detail into that final goal as you possibly can. Flesh it out. All the details you can have in this particular moment in time, but you're using it in here. Your third eye is one heck of a projector. We'll try to keep this PG. So what is it that you're looking for? First, that was the first thing that you have to do in any of these books. And Wallace Wattles, in the book that where did I hide that title at? The Science of Getting Rich. He writes these things out in such amazing detail. I've read this book like 7 times now. I don't have it with me, it's in my storage unit, but I've read it so many times because each time you read it, you get a deeper understanding of these exercises. But the first thing you have to do is, what is it you truly want? You have to make a decision. Well, I want to be wealthy. What does that mean? Well, I want prosperity. What does that mean? Be specific. I want to have $50,000 sitting in my account every single year. I want to increase my income to 6 figures. You have definitive guides. You set your parameters. Then, how does that make you feel? If your immediate thought is you're going from making $15,000 a year to $125,000 a year, and you're like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do that. You're not in the right mindset. Take that 15,000, move it to 75. That's something that's doable. You don't feel nervous about it, and you can get that into a mind frame of, I have this. This is what my income is now. And then, how does it make your life change? What's different? Details. I've paid off my mortgage. I've paid off my car. I'm setting up my kids' college fund. However that manifests, but these are the things that you visualize. You don't do it in a future tense. You do it in the now. Creative visualization is focusing on, because in reality, time is such a weird illusion for all of us. But this is the type of stuff he was teaching, not in as much detail as we would have now. It was very basic, which is easier to understand, honestly. But how do you feel when you visualize that? How does it look? When you are sitting in a meditative state, can you see yourself standing in that lifestyle? Can you see yourself in these positions? In his book, The Science of Getting Rich, he goes through this process, and it's really simple. It's like a 100-page book or something, 120 pages, something. It's not very long. Each chapter goes over what it is you're trying to do through these exercises, setting your goals, writing them down, putting this stuff into practice, which, again, for the time was amazing. But you'll keep going through it like, what is better about this new life? What has changed for you? When you're doing these exercises, you're connecting into the universe, God, source, divine energy, and saying, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I'm creating. That is how you co-create your life. And when you're doing that, the other part about it, and he mentions this a couple times in his work, I don't think he uses the word gratitude, but this is what you're doing. You're thanking everything into existence. I am so happy and grateful was one of the phrases in The Secret that I absolutely love, for whatever it is. I'm so happy and grateful to be making $75,000 a year. I am so happy and grateful that I have paid my mortgage off. I am so happy and grateful for my new car. I'm so happy and grateful that my kid's college is paid for. But you're doing it in a now or a past tense, so you're setting yourself up to be in that frequency. One of the other modern day terms is you're jumping timelines. Well, you're shifting your awareness into a higher frequency, and that's a shifting your life. This was the stuff he was teaching. Again, these are all new phrases, but he was teaching this in the early 1900s. And he lived what he taught. He went from poverty to being fairly wealthy by the time he'd passed. So that's kind of where his popularity grew from. And like I said, I highly recommend his book, The Science of Getting Rich, and what's The Science of Being Great, I think is the next one. Yeah, The Science of Being Great. I highly recommend those two books, really, to anyone. Because if you really want to start to understand the law of attraction, how we describe it now, and there are some modern day people, another one that I highly recommend is anything by Abraham Hicks, because as Esther channels, she brings through the concepts of the law of attraction very, very clearly. He's a great start your foundation strong with Wallace Wattles and then switch over to them, because you'll get a lot of compatible ideas, and it allows it to work easier that way. There's a lot of people out there that practice this. Those are the two out of, I don't know, probably 50 or so I've read that are really work well together in their concepts. So anyway, continuing on. Wallace also had some interesting ideas about diet, and he has two of his books were about diet. He was a huge advocate of fasting, and I'll show you a picture of him. This was later on in his life, within the last 10 years before he passed. You could tell that he didn't eat a lot, and I can't honestly say that extreme fasting is a good idea, but that's kind of what he worked with. He believed that we gain energy not from food, but from universal energy. He believed that God recharged your body in your sleep, and that food was not necessary, it was a minor pleasure or a distraction. It can be both of those. And yes, you do recharge in sleep, but the machine we function with does need nutrients. There is a belief in the East, again, of this extreme fasting where you're eating like half a cup of rice or whatever, barley, a day, and then they'll reduce it down, but it's part of a mummification ritual. It's not something that's practiced for exceptionally long periods of time unless it's going towards this one practice. So they've found that there are some other options that are beneficial for that, and we'll get into those in a second. But he believed that through fasting you opened the door to immortality. Let's just say that the proof's in the pudding and that didn't work for him. Just saying. And it's fine that he wanted to do that. I personally like food. So, and if you're wanting to look for immortality, start practicing alchemy. That's probably the best way. You'll also develop some really interesting spiritualities through that. But there are good grief, I can't talk today, I'm sorry. There are medical benefits to fasting, and there are spiritual benefits to fasting, but his ideas were not fully accurate regarding this topic. Things like intermittent fasting, which have been shown to have a lot of benefits for mind and body, is a more modern day one, and taking and doing a 3-day fast every 60-90 days, however that works out for you, is another one where you can actually purge your system, clean things up. Those have been shown to have benefits, but he's talking fasting as in like weeks at a time. It was not the best practice in that regard, but you can look up a lot of the benefits of it. Again, in short-term or intermittent style of fastings are pretty interesting to research. There's also some of the diets, I think it's the carnivore diet, I believe, where you're eating a very specific type of diet, and over a very weird portion of time, usually 90 days or so, 3 months, you're down to eating once a day no matter what. But people who do that actually are really healthy, and doctors can't figure out why. But it's what you're eating and not so much the fasting part. You're just not hungry and you're functional. So there's a lot of interesting information out there if you're interested in fasting and learning about that. Again, I put the books about his health down there as in the description of the video as well, mainly for reference. I don't advocate for everything that he talked about, obviously, but his Science of Getting Rich, Science of Being Great are amazing if you're looking to really get a foundational level in the law of attraction and creative visualization. And I'll probably do some topics on some other people as well, because there's a few other ones out there that I really, really, really like, and they expand massively on what he started. But if you're just wanting to get a good foundation, he's the one to start with. He kind of brought this into the public awareness, the public consciousness. Again, his books have never been out of print, so it's not like there has ever been a time where people didn't know about him. But to know about him on a grand scale, that didn't happen until the last 25 years or so. But there's a lot of good that can be gleaned. Again, there's some other stuff that's not so great with him, but that's beside the point. Continuing on here, Wattles died in February of 1911, so just after his last book was written. He died away from his home, and he was returned to the home of Elwood, Indiana. Good grief. And as a sign of respect and goodwill for the town, because he had done a lot to benefit his community, he helped them develop some of their techniques. So the town was doing really well thanks to him and his teachings. They closed all the businesses for 2 hours on the day of his funeral. So nothing was going on. Everyone was at his funeral, which you don't usually see that unless someone has been exceptionally beneficial for their environment or their community. The one thing that I did find interesting was Florence, his daughter, stated that Wallace died in an untimely manner. Like I said, when you research how he was doing his fasting, it doesn't surprise me why he died how he did. But he had been suffering from, quote, extreme fragility in his later years, end quote. That was according to Florence, because she was, I think, the closest one to him towards his end. He was only 51, again, finding a source that says an exact date or exact age, because they couldn't decide on where he was born or when he was born. 1860s was kind of 61, but he died in 1911, so 51 years old. That's really young for someone to pass, even during that time where the average lifespan was about 70. He died young, and like I said, when you looked at his picture, bring that back up, he's very, very gaunt through the face. You can tell that he's fasting. The other thing that I thought was interesting as I was looking over various pictures of him is for 51 being almost bald. Now, there are some genetics that go along with hair loss. So it could have been his father and his mother lost their hair young, but it could also have been his diet or his lack of diet that led him to that. But when he passed, he was not poor. I couldn't find an exact amount on his value, but we would consider him today upper middle class, if not upper class altogether. And it was all through his practices. And he literally, if it wasn't in his books, he didn't do it. He literally practiced what he preached. He used his life as a laboratory, which a lot of people don't like that phrase. I personally love it. He taught what he knew. Again, he developed this from really not a great educational background. There have been other people who have developed these abilities, this knowledge gleaned from whatever they could get their hands on. And it's interesting to watch people who go from severe poverty like he was, and they use tools and techniques as he taught them in his books. Other people found other ways, but he was, again, the foundational one. And they all figured out ways to develop, if you can see it here, open this up, third eye, see it in your mind's eye, and then allow it to project into your life. Like I said, the new terms are you're skipping timelines, you're co-creating your life with the creator of the universe. There's a lot of ways to look at this, but it all boils down to make a decision. What do you want? That is the first thing that he talks about in his book. It's the first thing several of these other people that we'll talk about later. That's the thing that they start with. Everyone wants a concept. Wealth, prosperity, abundance. Those are cute words. What do you want? That's not an answer when you give me that. And when you read his work, especially The Science of Getting Rich and The Science of Being Great, those words are in there, but they are more descriptive than just a concept. That's the stuff that he was teaching, and that's the stuff that has been brought forward for so many years. Is the first thing you have to decide is, what is it you want to create? What is it you want your life to really be? Put your creativity into it. This is stuff that I've learned over the years. I love to write, so I write essays on what I want my life to be. I always write it in the present tense. I put lots of emotions into it. I put lots of creativity, a lot of gratitude into it. So it's like when you read it, your heart swells. There are people who paint your life. There's people who sculpt it. Put your energy into creation, and the universe will match you. And that's that's what he taught. He didn't use quite those words in all of what he did, but he did go along those lines. But that's what I'm saying. But it's like when you look at how his life went financially, how he grew, he built businesses, he made a lot of money over the years, didn't quite tie into his socialist political views. He did donate a lot, don't get me wrong. But it was interesting when you start looking into some of his other stuff where you're like, these two things do not make sense together. But that's a whole different story. But his contribution, though, to the awakened mind is very, very relevant to today's world. So, hopefully, if you're interested in stuff like that, go check out his book. The Science of Getting Rich is the primary one that I will reference, and I will highly recommend to anyone. The Science of Being Great is the second one on the list. Both of those books are absolutely amazing. The Science of Being Great I've only read a couple of times, but The Science of Getting Rich, it's worth going over. Matter of fact, I think I'm going to dig mine out of my storage unit so that I can actually reread it, because it's good to have that refresher, especially when you're trying to figure out where did my money go? It's a good way to help remind you of what you're doing in life. I also put in the description Rhonda Byrne's movie, The Secret, I think. Let me double check my notes here. And I also put the book in there as well, so if you're interested in that. The movie is, and I will 100% say this, especially now when I watch it, it's a little bit cheesy. Are the points still valid? Yes. Are some of the teachers in there, because she collected a whole bunch of them, are some of the teachers in there a little weird? Yes. But their lives are literally what they teach, and it actually starts to play out. There's a couple of them I don't like. It's a personal thing. There's other ones that I really do get a lot of good information out of. And there's another gentleman, and I don't know if I'll talk about him so much with this type of concept, but his name is Bob Proctor, and he played a huge role in Rhonda Byrne's movie. But he has been practicing, well, he passed a couple years ago. He practiced Wallace Wattles' work primarily for years, and it made him one heck of a powerful speaker in the business world. They all kind of go back to Wallace, all the new ones anyway. So it's worth checking out. Check the book. It's not that long. And my challenge to you, and I don't usually do this in videos, but my challenge to you in this one: read the book, buy a journal, practice each chapter as he describes it, journal your results, but put real effort into it. Don't just kind of flippantly go through it. Put your energy into it, put your creativity into it. See what happens. You never know what might come out of it. So, with that, thank you guys for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button so you'll know when I go live or drop new videos. Comment what your thoughts are. If you've used any of Wallace Wattles' exercises, read any of his books, let me know what you think in the comments down below. With that, I will let you guys go, and I will see you in the next video.